I've owned my Lotus Emira for 2 years now, and it's been mostly a positive experience, but it's not for everyone. I'm going to tell you 7 reasons why you should not buy a Lotus Emira, starting with reason number 1, the badge. So if you care about badge prestige and what a car actually says about you, I don't think the Lotus Emira is a good choice for most people. And what I mean by that is the type of car you buy says a lot about you and your personality and your values. And if you want a badge on a car that is going to impress people, is going to make them think that you're successful and you have great taste, then Lotus probably shouldn't be your first choice. In fact, I'd say that some competitors to this vehicle, such as a Porsche Cayman GTS 4.0, is going to be more your speed, because Porsche, especially in recent years, they've become a much more desirable brand that says you're successful, you have great taste, you are the man when you drive a Porsche. Whereas with the Lotus, it says that you're kind of quirky, you care a lot about driving, there's probably a lot of issues with your car, and it doesn't have that same panache as a Porsche. And that brings us to point number 2, which is the spec sheet and lap times. If you prioritize metrics, then the Lotus probably isn't for you either, because for the money, you don't make that much power, you don't have that great of 0 to 60 times, you don't have very impressive lap times as well. You can get other vehicles at a similar price point or even cheaper, which can outdo the Lotus Emira in terms of both lap times and the spec sheet. We're powered by the 3.5 liter supercharged V6, the Toyota 2GR FE engine, same engine from the prior Lotus Evora, and here it's making 400 horsepower, 310 pound-feet of torque. The car weighs around 3,200 pounds, and 0 to 60 is a bit over 4 seconds. And that brings us to point number 3, which is if you don't prioritize driver engagement and feel and feedback, then this is also not the car for you. There isn't really much here for you, I would argue, because the spec sheets aren't very impressive, and what it does offer is a much more connected and engaging driving experience. But that's also not everyone's cup of tea, and that's totally fine. Some people want a bit more isolation and insulation and want to be separated from the road noise or the texture in the steering wheel or the communication through the chassis. They don't want to feel as much. And if that's you, that's totally fine. But the Lotus Emira is not really going to scratch your itch, because the performance is decent. But you can get other cars that are better on the spec sheets and give you more of that refinement. And there's nothing wrong with that. But if that is you, just keep in mind that the Lotus tends to give you much more driving engagement and feel. Like just around these corners, I can feel exactly what's happening at the front end because we have hydraulic steering. It's primarily just Lotus and McLaren that still use a hydraulic steering rack because it actually reduces your fuel efficiency slightly, but it gives you so much more feel and feedback through the front end. And most people actually just don't care about that. They don't prioritize that. This is also the sport suspension, or sport chassis option rather, and it's slightly firmer. For a sports car, it's still quite supple because Lotus have really specialized in making cars that can handle the bumpy British B roads. But if you're used to something that is more supple, this will feel a little bit harsh, a little bit too communicative to you, where you're feeling all the bumps and what's happening at each and every corner. You can feel the suspension move at the front right versus the rear left, because they've built in that communication intentionally with the very lightweight yet rigid aluminum extrusion bonded chassis. And that brings me to point number 4, which is if you're not okay with a slightly more challenging and sometimes clunky driving experience, again, the Emira is probably not for you. Now, what I mean by that is if you think of a Porsche, or you think of even certain BMWs at this price point, they're a bit more polished and refined and natural and even easier to drive. The Lotus, on the other hand, has some quirks. The manual transmission has a very satisfying throw and actuation to it, but sometimes it can be a bit finicky, and getting into gear, the synchros can fight you, and it's to the point where I'll oftentimes find myself double clutching like that from third into second. And what I found the hard way from making content about, how to double clutch and things like that is most people do not want to do it. It feels like extra work. It is a skill that is not super easy because there is a learning curve to do it properly and smoothly. It took me a lot longer to learn double clutching than it did for me to learn a regular rev match, as an example. And some people find that very frustrating. They find that to be a chore, and I'll just put it this way. If you're the kind of person that enjoys auto rev match on your sports car, then this is definitely not the car for you, because first of all, there is no auto rev match. And in fact, it goes the opposite direction of having the driving experience actually be more challenging than most manual transmission vehicles. Wow, this shitty road is actually an even shittier condition than normal. But hopefully after they're done working on it, it'll be better than ever. So, again, there are different types of driving preferences. So, if you're the kind of person that really wants a slick and smooth and refined driving experience, and you want the manual transmission to always make it easy as possible, this is not the car for you. But I would argue that for a lot of us, having a slightly more challenging and involving driving experience can make things more fun. Because why do you want a manual sports car, assuming that you do want a manual sports car? By the way, the 6-speed automatic transmission torque converter here is horrible. I do not recommend it. The inline 4 paired with the DCT is so-so. You can watch the review of a V6 versus the inline 4, linked below. But a lot of us that want the manual transmission experience, we do so because it is more involving, it is more challenging. By definition, there are more steps and more complexity compared to just driving an automatic. So, in my mind, going one step further and saying, well, I want a manual transmission that does demand a lot of me as a driver, I find more fun. But maybe I'm just the weird one out, or maybe I'm coping. I mean, I've always found mastery of these kinds of physical activities and physical traits and dexterity to be rewarding. You know, it's not quite dexterity, but it's still mastering the clutch, the shifter, and having the timing just right. Back when I was doing plastic surgery, we used to say that how you do anything is how you do everything. So if you're the kind of person that enjoys pursuing mastery, and maybe you're like me, that you would actually brush your teeth with your left hand to try to improve your left hand dexterity so that in the operating room you could be a better surgeon, so that you could be closer to ambidextrous, then you probably would actually enjoy this driving experience. It is not forgiving. You have to be perfect as a driver to operate this manual transmission smoothly, and even still, if you do everything right, it may still be difficult. And in those instances, it will reward you by using more advanced techniques like a double clutch. And then, when you get close to a corner, you actually can do that, a heel-toe double clutch at the same time. These are things that people don't want to learn, or they resist it because it's harder, it's challenging, it makes them feel like they need to relearn manual. You're not relearning manual, you're just layering on different techniques. The heel-toe double clutch at the same time, when people sometimes get confused that, hey, why are you doing heel-toe double clutch? They're totally different. Well, a heel-toe is slowing you down while blipping the throttle to rev match as you downshift. A double clutch is stopping the gear shift in neutral, letting the clutch out to rev match the input shaft as well, so the synchros have no work to do before going down to the next lower gear. Doing both at the same time is arguably the single most challenging technique in all of manual transmission driving, and that's the fun in it, is like you are challenging yourself and seeing, can you do it perfectly smoothly? It is not easy. Even today, I've been driving stick shift for more than a decade. I do not always perfectly nail my heel-toe double clutch, and especially when I'm jumping from vehicle to vehicle. But that's part of the fun, is pursuing that mastery and trying to get better and become the best driver that I can be. By the way, if you want to know more about double clutch and how to double clutch heel toe at the same time, then check out the videos below. I have tutorials on how to do that. And no, it is not necessary, but I do think it'll give you a deeper appreciation for driving manual, and it'll just improve your driver skill toolbox, your repertoire of what you can do behind the wheel. So when you're driving your buddy's car that has failing synchros, you don't have to actually shift slow and worry about grinding gears. But if you feel that it is super extra and unnecessary, then hey, you do you, man. That's fine. You don't have to learn it. It's just for those people that want to be the best possible drivers the widest skill set. And that's not everyone. That's totally fine. Next up, point number 5 is you don't have much tolerance for issues with your car. And I actually fall into this category. I hate when my car has issues. I need to take it to the shop. I need to work on it. It's stuck on, you know, the jack stands, and I can't enjoy it the way I want to. I hate inconvenience. A lot of my life, if you've watched some of my prior like therapy drive videos, I talk about how as I've developed in my career and as I've gotten older, I try to use my time and effort and money and just intentionality to buy myself time and to buy myself convenience. And a car that is not working is by definition working against that, right? Because now you have to go to and from the shop, your car's not usable, you have to do some work yourself or take it to a shop, and it's a headache. Luckily, this car with a Toyota powertrain, that 2GR FE supercharged V6, that part is bulletproof. The other parts of the car may have issues. So my transmission will sometimes pop out a third when you're redlining and shifting from second to third. I've seen that on track. You guys can watch this video on track and actually see that happening in real time. So I have to get the cable linkages adjusted by the dealership. The infotainment needs to be updated. It's having some lag and some other, you know, quirks and issues. There's some small things here and there, and I've been pretty lucky. I know some other people have issues with their door paint that's bubbling and many other headaches that you can find out on the Emira forums at emiraforum.com. So if you despise that, if you don't have tolerance or patience for dealing with that kind of headache, then the Lotus is probably not for you. Luckily for me, it hasn't been too bad, but again, I need to take it to the shop. I have to work on the shifter. There's like this clunking when you go full lock on the steering. So I need to take a look at that. That's also a common issue. Some small things here and there, nothing that has prevented me from enjoying the car, but maybe I'm lucky, because you do hear these horror stories for not only the Lotus Emira, but pretty much all Lotuses. We call these problems Lotusisms, the quirks and reliability issues that you'll get from a smaller boutique kind of built vehicle versus something that is far more established and polished like a Porsche. That brings me to point number 6, which is that you probably don't want a Lotus Emira as your only car, because number 1, it may have some reliability concerns as we just covered, but number 2, it's also not the most practical. It's actually perfectly comfortable. Even my girlfriend, who is discerning of ride quality, she hates my Mazda Miata because I put coilovers on that and it's definitely not comfortable. But my Lotus Emira, she tolerates without issue, even with the sport chassis, because again, Lotus did a great job tuning this. But the reason I say you don't want this as your only vehicle is largely because of the lack of practicality. There's no frunk. So a lot of mid-engine cars, such as the Porsche Cayman, will give you a frunk for added practicality. Here, no frunk at all. And the trunk in the rear is quite small. It is notably smaller than the C8 Corvette. The C8 Corvette, they famously wanted to make it wider to be able to accommodate a set of golf clubs because they knew their target demographic and clientele. With Lotus, they said, yeah, fuck that noise. We don't care about fitting golf clubs back here. We want to maintain the beautiful shape and aesthetics of this car. So rear trunk space is pretty limited. You do have a small shelf behind these driver and passenger seats. In the Evora, it actually used to be seats, which, believe it or not, the first time I ever drove an Evora GT, I had the salesman right here passenger seat. I had my ex-girlfriend, who was like 5'1", behind me, and the salesman's son, who was like 7 or 9 years old, behind him. 4 people in a Lotus Evora GT, believe it or not. And yes, the car did feel quite a bit slower with all that weight. But overall, not super practical. Again, you're going to have those little niggles and issues with being a Lotus, so I don't recommend it as your only vehicle. You could do it. You have CarPlay, you have relative comfort. The road noise isn't terrible. It's probably comparable to my GR86. It's definitely better than my Mazda Miata, but my Mazda Miata is a convertible. And point number 7, the final point why you should not buy a Lotus Emira, is the amount of attention it gets. This looks like a baby supercar, and I actually was stopped today in my neighborhood by a neighbor and their grandson, who was really excited to talk about the car and ask what kind of car it is, because people don't know Lotus, right? They know Ferrari, they know Lamborghini, and the child was really interested in learning more about the car, asking what it was, and the grandma told me that her son was really set on buying a Lamborghini when he grew up, and they had never heard of Lotus. Like, oh, like, who makes Lotus? I'm like, no, Lotus is the manufacturer, and this car is called the Emira. It's from Britain. from the UK. And it was all totally new to them. People are very much going to notice this car, especially depending on the spec you get. I have Atlantis Blue with yellow calipers and the diamond cut wheels, and this does get attention. I've been stopped at gas stations occasionally. I've been stopped just driving around. People want to roll down the window and ask me how fast is it. I'm like, hey, it's actually not that fast. It's a lot slower than it looks. And there's pros and cons that come with that. I think if you're the kind of person that wants to more fly under the radar, Lotus Emira is definitely not for you because it looks more like a supercar. It looks more expensive than it is. And in fact, I would argue that a Porsche Cayman, which is far more commonplace and is not going to raise as many eyebrows or grab as many stares, would get you less attention. You'll be stopped far less frequently at a gas station. People aren't going to be asking you what the car is because they've seen this around more frequently. And there are pros and cons that come with that, because most interactions, by having more attention, are going to be favorable, but sometimes you just feel like you're then being watched, and there's a little bit more pressure on you, and you know, sometimes you'll have negative interactions too. And even when you park the car, like with this car, unlike with my old GR86 or my current Miata or my old FRS, I never had a concern really parking in places because I knew that young people weren't going to lean on the car and take photos and pose with it. Whereas with this car, I have had people, at least they asked me, like, hey, can I pose on your car? I'm like, well, no, please don't touch my car. And you know, I don't want their jeans that have the, you know, the buttons and whatever scratching up the paint or whatnot. So I personally find it very distasteful when people lean on other people's cars or take photos with it in that way. But hey, maybe I'm just too particular and I care about that. You won't have to worry about those things with other cars that don't demand as much attention. And now when I do go on a date night to go get a nice dinner or, you know, go to the strip or whatever, I will purposely park this car away from most of the other cars because of the attention that it does receive. Now, those were 7 reasons you should not get a Lotus Emira, but if you check out this video right up here, I'm going to tell you why buying expensive cars like this won't make you happy and my own experience of owning this Lotus Emira.